The rumors over the past months were obviously true. Maria Grazia Chiuri stepped down as the creative director of Dior after almost a decade with the brand. These rumors intensified during her last show, which merged haute couture and resort. So people were already asking, why did they merge the two? Will there be another haute couture collection by Maria Grazia Chiuri? And then another hint was that some of the models wore these veils or blindfolds, which were also a reference to her former colleague Kim Jones, who just stepped down as the creative director for menswear in January. Her successor will be Jonathan Anderson, the former creative director of Loewe, which is also LVMH owned, just like Dior. And he had already been appointed creative director for menswear in April, and now he was appointed the successor of Maria Grazia Chiuri. Let's look into the legacy of Maria Grazia Chiuri at Dior. Her time was a polarizing one, but also a hugely successful one in terms of business for Dior and LVMH overall. Just as a side note here, this is a non-sponsored video, I'm just sharing my personal opinion and my research here. Everything is alleged and for entertainment purposes only. And if you're new here, welcome to my channel. My name is Liz. I talk about luxury and fashion once a week. So if you want to learn more about fashion history, the fashion business or fashion events, come on over, join the fun and subscribe to my channel. Who is Maria Grazia Chiuri and how did she actually end up at Dior? She was born and raised in Rome. This is also the city where she hosted her last fashion show for Dior. Her mother was a seamstress, so we can say she actually grew up with fashion. She had a very strong interest from the beginning onwards. And then she also studied fashion design at the Istituto Europeo di Design in Rome. She always stressed in interviews that this education was a very traditional one, that it focused on craftsmanship, on the fashion itself, and not so much on the impact of fashion. I think this dimension came later when she started her professional life. Her first job was with Fendi, which is also based in Rome. It's run by 5 sisters, so we can already see she also worked with very strong women throughout her career. This was also the time when she hired none other than Pierpaolo Piccioli, and they're actually friends. And in 1999, Chiuri switched to Valentino, and in 2008, Chiuri and Piccioli then both were appointed co-creative directors of Valentino. In 2016, she joined Dior, and she followed in the footsteps of Raf Simons, but also John Galliano, Marc Bohan, Yves Saint Laurent, so very big names. And what we also see, she was the very first woman to lead the house. And this is actually quite interesting because when we think about the fashion industry, it's actually very much geared at women. Yet when we look at the higher ranks of the industry, most of these ranks are filled with white men. And when we look at this most recent musical chairs in the creative directors, again, it shows that middle-aged white men took over the creative director post, most of them, let's put it like this. The rumors around Maria Grazia Chiuri stepping down had been going on for months. This is also kind of natural. She had been with the brand for almost 10 years. And there had been so many changes within the fashion industry. I think I lost track actually during the past year how many creative directors stepped down and new ones came in. So it was a natural question, but I finally got my own confirmation of the rumors during the earnings call of LVMH for their year 2024, when people in the audience asked again this question about Maria Grazia Chiuri stepping down. And I don't remember the exact answer by Bernard Arnault, the CEO of LVMH, but it was something along the lines where he vehemently defended, no, we're not doing this. We have this long relationship with our creative leaders. And this was already for me a sign, something is going on, because it reminded me of what happened at Chanel a year ago when CEO Lina Nair was asked about Virginie Viard. And she praised Viard in this interview and said, we are so happy. And then shortly after that, Viard left the brand. Let's look into Maria Grazia Chiuri's legacy at Dior in terms of design and artistic language, because throughout her time, her collections kind of polarized. Some people loved them, some hated them. I have the feeling there's nothing much in between. And she did develop her own artistic language during her time at Dior. And her designs were very different from John Galliano, for example. Galliano stands for eccentricity, opulence. He also caused controversy. It was John Galliano for Dior. So it was his design language merged with the house of Dior. Of course, Maria Grazia Chiuri, we can see it immediately when we look at her designs. She opted for a more quiet approach, if we put it diplomatically. We could also say it was boring or commercial if we want to be a bit more skeptical or cynical. And a lot of people criticized exactly that. I also do have to say very often I had the problem with her collections that they kind of blended in. It seemed to be always kind of similar things. I can't even tell you was this 2018 or 2022. That's sometimes my problem with Maria Grazia Chiuri, and I don't know if we can only blame her alone for this. I think it's probably the business approach of Dior or the mother company LVMH, because ultimately what do they want to do? They want to sell products. And while a Galliano, for example, is very interesting in terms of design, probably the more quiet or commercial designs of a Chiuri sold better. It probably appealed to more people. It does not necessarily mean just because they made a lot of money in the short term that this was the best strategy for the long term. We see that at many brands, that the creative directors are kind of forced into thinking about the numbers, which is very difficult for creative people, but it's part of the job because fashion ultimately is a business. But it is a bit sad when the creativity is really cut off completely, because I do think in the long run it may damage the brand if they become too commercial, too bland, because we also need excitement when we talk about fashion. I may not buy the eccentric haute couture by Galliano, but maybe it gives me an impulse to also incorporate this in my daily wardrobe and make it more interesting. So this is definitely something that was a point that a lot of people criticized with Chiuri's time at Dior. And I'm not saying here that Maria Grazia Chiuri is not a talented designer, not at all. I actually think she's very, very talented. And what I find so interesting about her is she has this creative mindset, but also a business mindset. And very often we can't really find that combination of creativity and business focus. So I actually think this combination makes her quite an interesting personality in fashion. At the same time, I do find it sad when creativity has to step back to make the designs more commercial, more appealing. I know this is how the industry works, but for me personally, this is really sad. I see this at so many brands. My other problem with Maria Grazia Chiuri's designs often was the lack of connection to Dior. There were some very obvious connections when she did reinterpretations of archival garments, and she very often went into the archives. But then when I looked at the outfits on the runway, especially also the haute couture, I was like, okay, well, this is nice, but what is really Dior about this? And I think this is also this challenge of being the creative director of such a famous brand with such a long heritage that was founded by a person, another designer with a personality, to find this balance between your own artistic interpretations and also the legacy of this designer who founded the brand. It may have paid off in the short run, because one thing we definitely have to say is that Maria Grazia Chiuri put Dior on the fashion map again for many people. Before that, Dior was kind of, I would say, in a limbo. It was nice, but with her, the awareness about the brand was definitely raised. So in the short run, it may have paid off to focus on these rather commercial designs, but in the long run, I actually think these brands damage themselves. And coming back to this whole commercial aspect and also this feeling when I look into the collection, Maria Grazia Chiuri very often worked with white, black, nude tones. She also said that she prefers to work with white because then you see the beauty of the construction of the garment, which is a valid point. But I have to say, if everything then is neutral, black, white, it also kind of becomes boring. And not all of her designs were in those shades, but it was very much her artistic language that we could see with those shades. Again, this is also something that probably sells better. Not every color works for every person. So maybe this was, again, this business mindset affecting the designs. My biggest problem with Maria Grazia Chiuri for Dior was that I sometimes could not tell what is haute couture and what is ready to wear. The haute couture was very quiet as well, sometimes very boring and bland. Yes, the dresses or garments were really flattering. They would look beautiful, but let's be honest, haute couture should also cause some excitement. Most people can't afford it anyway, so it's kind of artistry. We could even say, if we want to stretch it, it's like artworks we put on a wall just that they are worn. I already know in the comments some people will say fashion will never be art, but we could look at it that way. And then when I saw the haute couture shows, I sometimes felt like, is this really haute couture? Sometimes I saw pictures and I was like, is this ready to wear haute couture? Then I saw the price point and it was clear it was haute couture. But if it's only clear through the price point, I'm not really sure if this is what we want to see from haute couture collections. The other issue I had is that in general, I'm very excited when I see that designers also incorporate elements from other countries or cultures that inspire them, or they work with these countries. And the show that Maria Grazia Chiuri did in 2023 in Mumbai was very much praised by so many people in the fashion world. And yeah, it was kind of cool to finally see something like this in India. But then when you looked at the designs closely and when you know a bit about Indian fashion, I do have to say this was nothing really new. It was nice, but was it groundbreaking? No. And to me, it also felt a bit gimmicky. You may now criticize me for saying this, but it felt a bit that Dior now as a brand has to address this huge market in India, because we all know there are issues with the Chinese market, which contributed heavily over the past years. It was seen as a holy grail for luxury, and suddenly the numbers there go down, and luxury just moves to the next holy grail, and at the moment this is India. And as I said, while I appreciate this incorporation of cultures, it felt a bit forced, it felt a bit gimmicky. It was also the same with this whole Mexico collection. I don't know, maybe I'm biased. This is just what I thought about this. Let me know in the comments below if you liked those collections. But I actually have to say this last collection that she presented in Rome was actually quite a good one. It was finally one again where you could see what garments were haute couture, and also this whole setting with this tribute to the Italian director Federico Fellini was also beautiful. So it is sad to say this about the last show, because you can see the potential, and it would have been nice to see more of this throughout the past decade at Dior. A signature characteristic of Maria Grazia Chiuri's time at Dior is that she worked a lot with the archives of the Maison. Probably the most famous example is the saddlebag, which was designed by John Galliano in the 2000s. It was a huge success back then, and now she did a re-edition later during her time at Dior. But she also did that on the red carpet for custom-made garments for celebrities, and I would like to discuss two of them here. The first one is the reinterpretation of the bar suit. It's probably one of the most famous, if not the most famous, design by Christian Dior. It was part of his very first collection in 1947. If you want to learn more about this, I also did another video about this iconic garment. And Maria Grazia Chiuri worked with this bar suit multiple times. She was not the first creative director to do this. Across all the creative directors, they all somehow incorporated this iconic garment. But I have the feeling we saw it a lot when Maria Grazia Chiuri was there. If I may be a bit cynical, maybe a bit too much, but let me show you two examples. In Cannes last year, Loewe, the French singer-songwriter, in this black and white interpretation, which looked nice. Was it groundbreaking? Probably not. Then there was a red interpretation worn by model Rhoda Mohammed, which was also designed according to the personality of the model. Also nice. Was it groundbreaking? Not really. Did we need two interpretations of the same garment at the same year in Cannes? I'm not so sure. This year at the Met Gala, also this bar suit made it on the blue carpet. Again, nice, nothing really groundbreaking. And this bar suit is also part of the ready-to-wear collection. You can see it on the website. There are some of these more contemporary bar suits, which are also nice, but in my opinion, they look like rather normal blazers with kind of a small nod to the bar suit. So overall, yes, it is the bar suit, we know it, but either it was too literal or it was a bit too little, too quiet. So I'm not sure what I should think about this. The other example that I would discuss here is two iconic dresses, the Junot dress and also the Venus. These were dresses that were also designed by Christian Dior himself, and they are really beautiful. Again, I did videos about those two dresses, and then Maria Grazia Chiuri basically transferred them into today, and it was done nicely. I do have to say Natalie Portman looked great. She always looks great no matter what she wears, but you can tell the difference. The original was way more intricate, it flowed better, and it was a very literal interpretation of this original garment. Anya Taylor-Joy's interpretation of the Venus was maybe a bit better because you could not tell immediately what was the influence. Some people mistook it for the Junot dress, so maybe that was a more interesting take on this archival garment. And this year in Cannes, Natalie Portman again wore a dress which a lot of people mistook as a reinterpretation of the Junot dress, but it was actually a reference of the Mexico dress from 1951. So overall, it's a nice attempt. I think it works for people who probably are not experts when it comes to the archives of a brand. And it's a good way to also draw attention to the history of the house. It's also part of the marketing to stress the legacy and the heritage of the original founder of the brand. But overall, I have to say, and this is not only a thing with Dior, maybe we have seen enough of these reinterpretations because they sometimes feel a bit cheap and easy, I would say, because it's easy to just go back into the archive and do a very literal reinterpretation of an archival gown. And I very often mention this, sometimes it feels like what also happens in the movie industry when a very successful classic cartoon is turned into a live action movie. Usually you watch the live action movie, you see it, and then you forget about it while you still cherish the original cartoon. So what I would like to see more from a creative director at a house as famous and big as Dior is, reinterpretations are okay, but with a twist, give us something interesting. They still can look nice, they still can look flattering, but I think one doesn't exclude the other. Probably Maria Grazia Chiuri's biggest legacy at Dior, the one that most people will talk about in the future also, is her impact on the business in terms of numbers. It's a sad reality. Creative directors can not only think about designing beautiful garments, they also have to look at the numbers. And in this field, Maria Grazia Chiuri was hugely successful. When we look at the numbers, especially the revenue under Maria Grazia Chiuri, we see that this revenue for most of the time continuously increased. I have to put a disclaimer here, it is a bit difficult to talk about Maria Grazia Chiuri's impact on these numbers because the brand Dior or its mother company LVMH, they only publish the numbers for Dior. They don't break it up in menswear, womenswear, other fields. So we can only make assumptions. But when we look at the development, the overall development of Dior, we see that in the haute couture field, the number almost quadrupled from 2017 until 2024-25. And similarly, the overall revenue in 2017, when Maria Grazia Chiuri joined, was 39.5 billion euros. It reached a high of about 86.2 billion euros in 2023, and then it dipped a bit in 2024 to 84.7 billion euros. So we see that this number doubled during the times of Maria Grazia Chiuri. So we definitely see, yes, overall the brand was very successful, but we can assume that a large share was women's wear done by Maria Grazia Chiuri for Dior. How can we explain this success? Partly it's probably due to the strategy with accessories. Maria Grazia Chiuri has always had a strong relationship to accessories, we can say, because when she started at Fendi, she was also in charge of the accessories. She also contributed to developing the Fendi baguette bag, which became so popular because of Sex and the City. Also at Valentino, she focused on the accessories, and here at Dior, she did the same. She also focused a lot on accessories. So when you look at a lot of brands, very often the accessories drive the business. It's very often actually not the clothing, and this is coming from a business or economical perspective. Why? Accessories, let's look at bags, not shoes. Let's look at bags. Bags are quite easy to make because there are no sizes. When you produce an entire collection, you have to offer it in multiple sizes, making it more expensive to produce. With a bag, there's only one size. This is also the advantage. The bags basically grow with you, so you never basically grow out of them no matter how your body changes. But this is also a big advantage for manufacturing those bags because you can produce more of the same, which also allows you to get cheaper prices for the products, for example, because you buy bigger quantities of the same. And it's also standardized, which also makes it easier to produce it cheaper. So this is in general the advantage of accessories. On top, very often the margins on these accessories are very high. And when we look at the case of Dior, which example then comes to mind? It's the book tote which Maria Grazia Chiuri launched in 2018. It's basically this boxy design. It's a tote bag without anything inside actually, so it's quite easy to make, and the advantage is also the variations. You can use the same structure and just produce it in a different color or pattern to make it interesting, and then also bring people back to buy another model of the same bag. So that's the business mind behind it. And then I already mentioned the cost. There was also this scandal. It was allegedly $57 to make this bag. And this bag starts at the moment, while filming this video, it started at around 2,700 euros or $3,300 depending on the model. If this is true, they make a lot of money with that bag. Again, this was alleged, so we can't 100% confirm it, but in general, we can assume that this bag can be made quite cost effectively and then sold at a very high price. And what made it possible to sell it at this price, and this was the marketing strategy behind it. And this is another legacy of Maria Grazia Chiuri. She was very savvy when it came to influencer marketing, because I have to say, when this bag came out in 2018, it only took a few days and you saw it everywhere. I think there was not a single influencer without this bag. Also think about it, these bags don't cost you that much to produce. They are not like an haute couture garment or a more expensive ready-to-wear garment. You can send this out to influencers without spending too much of your cost. So you can actually reach a lot of people with this. And this definitely contributed to this aspirational aspect. A lot of people saw their favorite influencers having these bags, and 2018 was also the time where these influencers, it worked really well working with them, because it was the onset, or rather the onset of this influencer marketing. And Maria Grazia Chiuri not only worked with normal or bigger influencers, she also involved the mega influencers. For example, maybe you remember in the same year, Chiara Ferragni, the Italian influencer, got married, and her wedding gown was made by Maria Grazia Chiuri for Dior. So two Italian women collaborating together. This was not the only time when they collaborated. This gown was inspired by the wedding gown of Grace Kelly. So this was also a huge marketing thing also for Dior. With a certain part of the demographic, she put Dior on the map. A lot of people probably who followed those influencers, also Chiara Ferragni, would not have been the typical customers at Dior. They might not have been interested in the Lady Dior, for example. But now Dior became hip or trendy. Another example would be the Dior sling bags that we saw on everyone for a certain period of time. So you may like the strategy or not. In terms of business, this approach was hugely successful. Until today, another big share of the popularity of this bag is also the personalization. It's quite easy to personalize a bag like this. The name can be stitched on quite easily. But this was also the time in 2018, personalization for many products was huge. I remember it was also the time of all these necklaces with our names. I also have them. It's nice when you can put your personal touch onto a bag or something else. So this was another very smart thing to do, to involve also this personalization element into this book tote and popularize it even more. And again, this commercial success can come with a huge flip side, maybe not in the short run, but in the long run, because when you see a product too often, if it becomes ubiquitous, is it really that interesting then? Luxury lives from scarcity. And if everybody has the same bag, and we are talking here about a bag that's quite expensive, we are talking here about almost 3,000 euros or $3,000, is this really something that people will aspire to all the time? My assumption is no. Maybe you have a different opinion and let me know in the comments below. But I am the type of person, if I see something too often on too many people, I get tired of it. And there are many of these examples in the past. Think about the Murakami collection in the 2000s. It was suddenly everywhere. Then there were also a lot of fakes of this bag. And then people lost interest. And similar with the book tote, when I go through an average shopping street or shopping mall in any city, you will pass a store selling bags with one model that resembles the book tote. Sometimes more similar and sometimes less. But this is also the flip side. So some people may say, for me it's not worth it, I'm not interested. And worst case, a lot of people may say, I'm not interested in this game anymore. I want something special. I don't want to spend that much money on such a simple bag that everybody else has. I don't want people to know how much I spent on a bag because everybody knows that bag. I'd rather opt for something made by a smaller brand where it may cost the same or even more, but people don't know about this. So this is also something that I think a lot of luxury brands, not only Dior, there are many other examples, they took that risk for the short-term success. I'm not sure if in the long run they will be very successful with it. And we already see the first signs because this strategy also focused a lot on the so-called aspirational customer. This customer does not have the budget of the core client of a luxury brand, but they also want to have a small part of that brand, and they usually go for the cheaper segments of that brand. And the book tote, even though it's quite an expensive bag, within the Dior product portfolio, it is actually at the lower end. And a lot of people who actually can't afford other garments by Dior, don't want to afford them, they bought these bags. And with this, they also financed the other segments. I said this in my video about haute couture, that very often the creative directors know they have to sell the rather mass-produced accessories in order to finance other segments such as haute couture. So this is also the business background about this whole success around Dior's accessories during Maria Grazia Chiuri's time and how it also impacted their revenues. Another big Maria Grazia Chiuri legacy at Dior will be her championing feminist topics. Already her debut collection made headlines because she designed this t-shirt saying we should all be feminists, and the reactions were mixed. Some people said it was great that she reminded us of the cause, others said it was too gimmicky. Overall, I have to say I appreciate it every time when somebody champions this cause of feminism. I do have to say sometimes in this whole stage of Dior, the brand, I also found it a bit gimmicky. Maybe we need to look more behind the scenes. When it comes to the behind the scenes, Maria Grazia Chiuri also was the one to found a mentoring program for women called Women at Dior. This program was also supported by UNESCO. I think it's a great move. If Dior, until Maria Grazia Chiuri's arrival in 2018, really didn't have a program to promote not only women but more diversity across the company, it's actually a bit sad. So it was great that she did it. Again, when I then look at it, Dior is such a big company, and then a mentoring program and t-shirts on stage are already a big statement. So I'm a bit conflicted on this. And I would like to say something about these t-shirts with the slogan, we should all be feminists. She just didn't slap this on a t-shirt. She also referenced an essay by author Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I hope I said the name correctly. So this already shows us that she is not only closely linked to feminism, but also that she worked with a lot of artists. Very often female artists, and this is something that I will remember from Maria Grazia Chiuri at Dior, that she promoted female artists from all over the world. Another example would be the collaboration with artist Judy Chicago, who designed a stage set for the runway show resembling a birth canal. Maria Grazia Chiuri also collaborated with Indian artist Ritika Merchant in 2025. So there are many of these examples. There's actually a documentary on YouTube about Maria Grazia Chiuri's collaborations with artists. It's called Her Dior. Again, this is a non-sponsored video, but I would like to share this documentary because I personally found it very interesting to watch. So my view of this legacy is, again, it's great that she did it. It's actually sad that such little effort is celebrated that much, but it's better than no effort. So I'm a bit like, okay, thanks for doing it, but actually the brand could do more. This is, again, not only Maria Grazia Chiuri's fault, this is also the brand. We don't know, maybe she even wanted to do more, but this was what was okay or accepted by the brand, so we will never know the behind the scenes. And also coming back to the feminism, Maria Grazia Chiuri's own career illustrates something that's going on in the fashion industry, because we see there are only very few female leaders within the industry, even though this industry heavily depends on women, heavily targets women, but most of the higher ranking posts in that industry are still held by white men. And when we look at the example of Maria Grazia Chiuri, she now steps down. Who is the successor? A middle-aged white man. I'm not saying that Jonathan Anderson is not qualified, but it shows that there's a lack of diversity overall, not only when it comes to gender, but also other areas in the fashion industry. And the case of Maria Grazia Chiuri itself, her career also illustrates that. Maria Grazia Chiuri, because of her efforts with the artisans, is also very often linked to the sustainability efforts of Dior. In general, I found it great that she put them on the map, because this is a problem within the fashion industry, that the brands don't give the artisans credit. They let them work for their collections, but they never even mentioned where the stuff was made by whom. And I think it would be beneficial, especially for luxury brands, to also put the artisans in the spotlight. I think most people probably have heard about her collaboration with Chanakya Atelier and their School of Craft in Mumbai. There are a lot of videos also on the Dior Instagram. So in general, I appreciated that it puts the artisans on the map. It's also an institute that works with female artisans. So all of this ticks a box. At the same time, I look at this, Dior is such a big and powerful brand, and then they have one major collaboration. Yes, there are others. For example, she also did this collaboration with artisans in Mexico. But when I look at it from the perspective of smaller businesses that also try to do these things, it's much, much harder. And if a brand like Dior comes in with so much power and says, if you want to work with us, there are these and these standards, we want to do this and that, I'm sure most of these suppliers would do that because it's really good business for them. It's also prestige for them. And then I'm asking myself, is this really enough to do this one collaboration or these few collaborations at the scale of a Dior? The other question that I ask myself is, look at the products that Dior makes. Again, they don't publish the numbers, but we can assume how many they are. Can this really be done with a few artisan collaborations? How are the other products made? I do have to say this is a legacy where I'm a bit conflicted talking about, because I did my research about Dior. What are they doing in terms of transparency when it comes to their supply chain, sustainability overall? And the problem that I have with so many of these luxury brands is the lack of transparency. And similarly here, Dior has a beautiful website where they say they are committed to the cause, they want to produce sustainably, and then you see a lot of buzzwords. They say recycled textiles, but that's the buzzword. They don't really explain which textiles, how are they used, nothing. Then they also mention that they are renovating their boutiques to come up to environmental standards. They don't say which standards. Then I'm also thinking like, well, you are a company like Dior. Is this really something that you have to mention, or is this something that we can expect from you, that your boutiques are, let's say, energy efficient, for example? And then they also mentioned their positive commitment to their employees. Again, this is a point where I'm thinking like, in 2025, do we really need to mention this? Yeah, unfortunately we have to. But the point about this is their positive commitment to their employees. But the problem in the fashion and luxury industry is that a lot of the processes are outsourced to independent suppliers. So what about them? Up until recently, or up until now, they have this excuse, they are not our employees, we don't have any influence. We know very often this is an excuse. There are laws coming into place, for example, in the EU taking care of this. But I saw this website and I was a bit like, well, that's all what you are doing. That's actually, considering the size of the business, the impact of the brand, the importance of the brand. Yeah, I think this is maybe, if I put it diplomatically, the bare minimum. So I'm not so sure if I see sustainability as a legacy of Maria Grazia Chiuri. Again, she did certain things, but I would not say it's outstanding. What is going to happen to Maria Grazia Chiuri now? What is she going to do? So again, there are a lot of rumors. Some people say that she may retire. I do have to say, when I compare her to many of the peers, I would be very surprised if she retires. Yes, she has reached that age, but when I think about the industry, when I think about a Lagerfeld who worked until his last day, Giorgio Armani is still involved in the brand in his 90s. I'm not sure if we can already say that's it for Maria Grazia Chiuri. She's going to retire. I think she may just take some time and reflect on the next steps. She also purchased the Teatro della Cometa in Rome in 2020, which she has been renovating since. So maybe this is this task that she's going to do from now onwards. I'm sure she also has a lot of other projects that she is working on. And it may be an unpopular opinion, but maybe she starts her own label, because I actually do think she is a very talented designer. She is a very talented businesswoman. So why not use it for her own business and show us what the real Maria Grazia Chiuri designs would be? That's an option. I don't know what you think about it. Let me know in the comments below. Also, please let me know, what did you think of Maria Grazia Chiuri at Dior? I said it very much polarized. Some people loved her, some people hated her designs. So let me know in the comments below if you are a fan or if you were already ready for a change. Also, let me know what you think about Jonathan Anderson being her successor. I also have my views on that. If you enjoyed this video, please let me know by doing two very easy things. Please like this video and also subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. If you prefer to read about fashion, I have many articles on my website, thepinklookbook.com, and if you have time, you can also check out my fashion label Pelagona. And if you enjoyed this video about Maria Grazia Chiuri's time at Dior, I have another video for you about another very interesting woman influencing Christian Dior. I'm talking about Catherine Dior, his sister. Thank you very much for watching this video, and see you in the next one.